Now, a sitting African president just handed America a military base dressed up as a hospital. Now, obviously, I've said that on purpose, and we're going to see when you watch this video.
Question from Kaya. Please keep it brief, Kaya.
Kyle Kumalo here from SABC News. President Ruto, this is just directed to you. A very turbulent time in East Africa in light of the outbreak of Ebola. And obviously, we've seen quite a number of reports coming out from Kenya with this establishment of the quarantine facility for the US citizens. I mean, obviously, the backlash that we've seen from Kenya, just your immediate reaction in light of that. Thank you.
The American government has supported us in this Ebola setup infrastructure, health infrastructure, to the tune of 1.8 billion Kenyan shillings. And they did make a request to us to, in the process of setting up all the other facilities, to also set up one where they can use in the event that their citizens, their soldiers, some of them in Kenya or from elsewhere, if they are in a situation, then they can use that facility. What you see as a debate in Kenya is lack of information. You know, people who may not have enough information to understand what we are doing. If we don't prepare and a situation occurs, we would have to answer much more difficult questions than the ones we are answering now. The questions we are answering now are simpler. They are easier. But if we were answering questions when people are sick and we haven't prepared enough, then we would be answering much more difficult questions. Where were you? What were you doing? What did you do? You knew there was a pandemic. You didn't do nothing. You know? What we are answering, the questions we are answering now is that we are prepared too much. And we are prepared for even our friends. And you see, I ask the people of my great country that the American people and government have been partners with us on matters health for close to 25, 30 years. PEPFAR and all the other funds. American resources, American taxpayers' resources have been used to support Kenyan health infrastructure. It would be most unfortunate if on one request by the Americans to set up a facility at their cost, we would refuse.
Wow, that's a very good speech. Well, a great speech. But I mean, we've just heard what the president of Kenya, Mr. William Ruto, has just said. And I want you to hold on to his exact words to say we would look inhumane if we refused the United States. Okay. Now, this whole thing, obviously, it resulted in a lot of protests. We saw a lot of Kenyans protesting, going in the streets that left 2 Kenyans dead. Now, you can imagine this was very unfortunate that this actually happened because these 2 people and a lot of people that were protesting, they were simply asking the same questions that President Ruto is actually answering now. So this whole thing of we would look inhumane, this is the very same question that President Ruto could have actually answered right from the very start to avoid all these things actually happening. Because it's very clear that there was no debate, there was no consultation on the Kenyan people, on the Kenyan government, and the people were not actually informed in this case. Now, let me be very precise with you because I think it's important to understand the details very clearly here, okay? This facility is not a civilian hospital. This is not a public health facility being built somewhere in Nairobi. So this is a 50-bed quarantine center funded by the Americans, as we've just heard from President Ruto, at the tune of 1.8 billion Kenyan shillings, being funded by the American people themselves, okay? So they are the ones that are taking charge to construct this facility. So this facility is actually meant for the Americans and not the Kenyans. Let's just take a listen at what this man had to say about that.
Americans think that their lives are so much important than the lives of Kenyans, so that they establish a facility in Kenya that is meant for only Americans. If they must be allowed to open that facility here, then it must be a facility that serves every human being.
So this facility, as we know, is a facility that is designed to treat Americans, okay? Americans who may have been exposed to Ebola in the DRC, right here, or in Kenya, or in Uganda, or wherever, within the neighboring areas, but not Kenyans, okay? This facility was not for Kenyans, as we've seen. So Kenya provides the land, as we've seen, but Kenya absorbs the political risk of everything that is happening. And I think this is what made the Kenyan citizens very uncomfortable about this whole arrangement. And the people who receive the care, the American citizens, they'll be flown in from different places, from somewhere else, and land in Kenya. Kenya already hosts 2 American military bases. We've got one in Laikipia Air Base in Nanyuki. This is where the 2 people actually died protesting. And this is where the quarantine facility is now being built. And then the other one is at Manda Bay in Lamu, okay? So the one in Lamu, obviously, this is where the African runs all these drone operations and special forces missions across the East Africa. Now, Kenya is not a neutral country in America's military architecture. Okay, it is an operational hub, and it has been for many, many, many years. And this Ebola facility adds a permanent medical infrastructure to a base America already controls. Now, obviously, there are those people that are praising the president to say he's done a great thing. Obviously, he's a very kind president, and he's showing up to the Americans. But here's a geopolitical question that really needs to be answered very loudly. Okay. The problem is, why does America need a quarantine facility on a military base in Kenya? Obviously, it's catered for the military people to treat the soldiers potentially exposed to Ebola. But other people might say, well, America has got powerful equipment. It could easily and safely fly all these people that contract Ebola to places, to medical facilities with very advanced equipment, such as in Germany, or the United States itself, or even the United Kingdom. So let me connect this to a bigger pattern, because this story does not start in 2026. For decades, the United States has used health emergencies and humanitarian language as the entry point for military expansion. Now, this is not the first time that we've seen all these Ebola kind of things, and in the past we've seen the Americans have always flown their patients across and very safely in places like America. But a lot of people are seeing this as a military expansion. For instance, if you look at PEPFAR, the humanitarian corridors, we've got all these health missions. These programs are real, but they always come with some kind of footprint, okay? And that footprint never seems to leave Africa. Do you remember that time in 2020? Kenya lawmakers tried to stop a U.S. military access rights being renewed. And that was such a battle in the courts, and the Kenyan government actually lost. So that agreement was extended. And in 2021, there was a Kenyan parliamentary motion questioning why AFRICOM operations at Manda Bay were not subject to Kenyan oversight. So there's always been these issues of overstaying, basically, or not having clear guidelines on what it means. For example, if they came and constructed this particular Ebola base, when would it cease to become an Ebola base? And I think these are the gray areas that a lot of people are asking. There needs to be more clarity into how these things are being done. And the only way they can do that is if they can sit down with careful consultations, either with Parliament or with the people themselves. I think that will be such a great thing. But here's what I want to leave you with. Empires such as America or France no longer need to march armies or through your capitals or to take over and stuff like that. They just look for a willing government, okay? Somebody like President Ruto, with all due respect, a kind man, the kind president, he's very willing to assist in this case, and that crisis sounds very urgent, and the right amount of money changing hands very quietly and very quickly, seems to be something that actually determines some of these deals. So looking at the way that the construction has been done, it's something that has been done very urgently, okay, and that construction continues anyway. So I think these are concerns, very genuine concerns, that the people of Kenya have been protesting about, where we've seen 2 people dead, and it's unprecedented. And we saw that when the Kenyan courts said no to the construction, that continued anyway. The Americans actually continued constructing. The president had already made his mind, and in his mind, and he clearly said it from the video we've just listened to, that this is the right thing that they are doing. And in fact, if anything, all these answers that they're answering now are actually the right answers to be answering. These are easy questions to be answering now. as opposed to answering some of the questions later on that will be much more difficult if the situation even gets worse. So you can see that the president has already got his mind screwed on. He knows what he's talking about. And so the debate continues, So I don't know how you feel about this, but this is something that we'll be looking at and watching very closely. So my name is NB, and this is War We Are Reclaiming. See you next time.